Hey guys, welcome to my channel Miss Recap. The story starts with a pathetic loser who was stabbed by a dangerous stalker woman. Suddenly the stalker woman activated her unique ability to coat her knife in lightning. As a result, Tomokui felt himself losing consciousness and was sure that he had died. The next moment he woke up briefly and wondered why he wasn't dead. He saw an ugly green monster in front of him that was feeding him with worms. Afterwards he fell asleep again, and the next day he found himself surrounded by many green ugly babies. He realized that after his death he was reincarnated as an ugly goblin. On the third day, Goburou learned that goblins grow up very fast. He then looked at the cave where he lived and tested his skills as a goblin. After he had explored the cave, the goblins received their last meal and learned that they were now responsible for their own food procurement. A few moments later, Goburou walked out of the cave and looked around. He realized that in this world, there existed creepy-looking monsters and plants that he had never seen before. Gobkichi, the largest of the born goblins, followed him, and he was excited to leave the cave. Goburou introduced himself to him and decided to form a team with Gobkichi. Next they entered the forest, and they discovered a one-horned rabbit. Gobkichi started chasing the rabbit and chased it towards Goburou. At the right moment, Goburou jumped from a tree and killed their prey. Gobkichi planned to eat the rabbit, but Goburou stopped him and beat up his teammate. He was a menace and showed Gobkichi that he was the top G of their team. A few hours later, Gobkichi woke up again, and Goburou shared the rabbit meat with his buddy. The next day Goburou used the same strategy to kill a horned rabbit, but this time he used his new weapon. His plan was brilliant, and he realized that he heard a strange voice in his head. During lunch he realized that he still had his unique skill called absorption. He was sure that his skill made him the strongest goblin in this world, and he could already feel how his aura became plus 10,000. Afterwards, he tested his newly learned ability, and he was cooking. Gobkichi was impressed by his friend, and Goburou couldn't wait to devour stronger monsters. On the sixth day, Gobmi learned that Goburou was capable of hunting horned rabbits. She immediately fell in love with Goburou, and she began to admire him. So Goburou decided to invite her to go hunting with his team tomorrow. Unfortunately it rained the next day, and he postponed the hunt to another day. He looked around the cave, and he discovered a group of kidnapped human women in the storage. Goburou was shocked by this discovery, and tried to distract himself by making weapons. Suddenly Gobji the goblin who had raised him appeared. He learned about the level system of this world from his grandfather, and Goburou realized that Gobji always gave the goblins lame names. Besides, he learned that his grandpa was already at level 86. Following this, Gobji explained that a goblin can reach a new form at level 100 and evolve like a Pokemon. Goburou was surprised by this and wondered if he was evolving into a Pikachu. The next day we see Goburou hunting again, and he fought the monsters in close combat with Gobkichi, while Gobmi fought as their backup. They were cooking, and Goburou managed to catch a lot of new monsters. Then they began to eat the monsters, and Gobmi was happy that she didn't have to eat Indian food anymore. Gobkichi didn't understand what she had against Indian food because he loves Indian food. Meanwhile, Goburou realized that by devouring a snake's head, he learned the ability to use poison. He was happy about it, and planned to get more powerful skills. In the following days, Goburou planned to test their new gear with his team, and they went into a cave. Suddenly they were chased by bats, which were most likely the reincarnation of Batman. Goburou stood behind his buddy, and started a counterattack. He used his evil eye against them, and managed to become the Batman Slayer. A few moments later, he ate the bat's flesh, and he learned other skills, such as echolocation. Suddenly we see some goblins who had been watching Goburou's group by eating the bats. The following night the goblins gathered around Goburou. He had activated an ability, and was able to prevent the attack of the 6 goblins. He beat up the attackers and accidentally used too much poison on a goblin. Afterwards, he planned to spare the rest, but Gobmi appeared behind him, and he learned that she was a menace. On day 13 they discovered an orc that was uglier than Shrek. Gobmi threw a stone at the monster and Gobkichi launched his attack. Unfortunately, he was pushed back, but Gobmi managed to break the orc's hand. Afterwards, Gobkichi stood up, and he managed to push the orc to the ground. Suddenly, Top G Goburou ended the fight, and he showed the enemy no mercy. Following this, he ate the orc to learn new skills, and suggested taking the rest of their prey back to their home. He shared his food with the other goblins, who were very grateful. Then Goburou went to sleep, but during the night he saw a bunch of writing in his head. The reason for this was that he got the chance to evolve. The next morning he discovered that he was not a pre-evolution goblin anymore. and he realized that he became a Charizard goblin. Goburou was surprised about this and noticed that he began to look the way he did before reincarnated in this world. Afterwards, his buddy Gobkichi woke up and he had evolved too. Gobmi was happy that they had evolved and Gobji was shocked that they became so strong, even though they were less than 1 month old. Suddenly Gobkichi wanted to test his new powers, and he challenged his best friend to a fight. As a result, they went out of the cave and they started fighting each other. Gobkichi tried to overwhelm his best friend with his fists, and managed to push Goburou back. Suddenly, Goburou made his move, and he managed to defeat Gobkichi with a strong kick. Gobkichi understood that he had lost, and he was impressed by Goburou. After the fight ended, Goburou heard monsters nearby, and he knew that danger was coming. He knew that Gobmi was hiding behind a tree, and asked her to get the crossbow he had built. Then we see wild Pokemon that had appeared on the tall grass. The wolves hunted rabbits and brutally devoured them. Suddenly they discovered Miss Piggy's husband, who was trying to escape from the wild Pokemon because he hadn't received any starter Pokemon from Professor Oak yet. As a result, the orc was eaten, and Goburou took the opportunity to attack. He ordered Gobmi to shoot the pack boss, who was injured and confused after the attack. After the boss was injured, Goburou and Gobkichi attacked the remaining wolves. Goburou and his friend managed to defeat the wolves with ease, and they acted like Chucky the Killer Doll in the fight. In the end, the wolf boss came to his senses and planned to take revenge on Goburou. Goburou prepared for the final battle, but the wolf died and fell to the ground. However, Goburou ate the wolf leader and gained new abilities. Later, he brought the wolves to the other goblins, and he expected them to catch the same amount of prey. Then Goburou planned to teach them how to hunt monsters, and they started to treat him like a god. Goburou said that they don't need to thank him because they are comrades and a family. At that moment, everyone started celebrating him, and he became the goblin leader. He received a lot of love from his comrades, and he planned to become even stronger. On day 17, something terrible happened because all human women drank poison. Goburou understood that the women had killed themselves because they had lost all hope. Goburou buried them, and he planned to stop Gobji next time before he sticks his wiener somewhere. A few weeks later, he trained the other goblins. While doing this, he also ate a lot of new Pokemons and rare dual monsters from Yu-Gi-Oh! Then we see a group of goblins and Goburou planned to kill them. Gobji stopped him and explained to Goburou that they are basically the father of his generation. After the raiders returned, they were greeted by Gobji. Goburou was surprised that the raiders captured some humans. At that moment, Gobji became Muten Roshi and planned to do nasty things with the human women. Goburou planned to stop him and asked for permission to look after them. But the goblins of the older generation were against it, and they planned to teach Goburou a lesson. This is how a fight arose between Gen Z and Gen Alpha. A few moments later, 2 girls from Generation Alpha appeared and tried to settle the dispute. Goburou learned that Hubsato and Hobsi were mages of Generation Alpha. Hubsato suggested that the 2 leaders of the 2 goblin generations should fight each other, and the winner gets to decide what the village is going to do from now on. Following this, Goburou beat up the leader of Gen Alpha, and he proved that he was the goblin's top G. In addition, we learned that Goburou had eaten Spider-Man a few days earlier, and received some spider abilities. After that, he officially became the leader of this village, and his friends were impressed. He brought the human women to the goblin cave and explained to them that the other goblins would not touch them. Also, he promised them that one day he would take them back to a human village. However, Rubelia asked what he wanted in return, and Goburou replied that he only wanted their human knowledge. He then learned that they were part of a traveling business, and the rest of the group were slaughtered by the older goblins. The next day, he visited the human women again, and brought them food. He was surprised that they weren't afraid anymore. The reason for this was that Goburou's aura was plus 10,000. Then Goburou learned that humans don't evolve like goblins, but they still learn new skills like in an MMORPG. A few days later we see Goburou, who had started a boot camp, and the other goblins had to do push-ups. Suddenly some older goblins were exhausted, and they tried to rebel against Goburou. Goburou beat them up and they got angry. On the 31st day, Goburou was sparring with his best friend, and the new goblins were impressed by their fight. They fought into the night, and after Goburou went to sleep, he sensed a group of goblins approaching the room where the human women were sleeping. The leader of Gen Alpha planned to rape the human women, but Goburou protected them and prevented the Gen Alpha goblins from attacking. Goburou was angry that the older goblins had disobeyed his orders. So he knocked out the Gen Alpha goblins and apologized to the girls for scaring them. That's when Gobkichi and the goblins of Gen Z appeared. Goburou felt like Pablo Escobar and told Gobkichi to take the guys outside. So the Gen Alpha Goblins understood that they couldn't act like a Giga Chad, and their leader died the next morning. The movie ends here. Thanks for watching. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notification so you can watch more videos like this.